Hi there. The Dungeon Master Roundtable you're about to watch is just one of a few topics that were covered during a live stream session hosted on the Dicely DnD Twitch channel, and the music you'll hear in this video was created by Tabletop Audio. And now I'll let our guests introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. You'll find that I do mostly Dungeons & Dragons, but a lot of 5e stuff as well, a lot of instructional stuff, and I am on Twitter, Facebook, Discord if you actually want to talk to me in person. Yeah, and I run light hall classes now. Would you believe it? I actually teaching it online. Taken me 5 years, but yeah, that's me.
How's it going? No fun allowed. And contrary to my name, I sometimes allow fun. I typically cover such things as running your tabletop role-playing games and running modules and things of that nature.
I am the Bear Bard, or Alex, as but normal people call me. I run Bear Bard Tales. We cover TTRPG stories from all over the sphere, mainly horror stories because that's what people want to hear, but you know, we try to throw some glory stories in there and stuff and try to take, I guess, lessons from that. You know, I try to add in a couple tips here and there, but you know, a lot of narration stuff within the space.
Hey, I go by Flutes on the internet, but governments and principalities call me Jordan. You can call me either. And I'm part of the Flutes Loot YouTube channel along with my wife, which branched out of our website, flutesloot.com, which has 200-something articles about different D&D and TTRPG subjects. And I'm happy to be here, though a little tongue-tied.
Hey there everybody, this is AJ Pickett. I am a full-time YouTuber that makes lore videos on Dungeons & Dragons and particularly monster ecology in a particularly easy listening and very thorough style with a lot of research put into them, so check it out.
Hi there, my name is Anthony Soll. I'm on the Play Dicely YouTube channel most of the time. Other times, I'm a professional dungeon master. You can find my services at fiverr.com/AnthonyTheDM.
All right, let's move on to the next topic I've got prepped here. So, continuing with a theme of meaningful gameplay, death is a possibility for the player characters in Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm sure we've all heard or even possibly experienced stories of TPKs or total party kills. So, the question I've got for you here. In the situation of a long-running campaign, how would you manage a team party kill? And how can you salvage a campaign after such a thing happens? We'll start with Flutes, and we'll go counterclockwise.
And I just felt the energy coming my way.
Yeah.
I actually am about to publish an article about why I believe, with very few exceptions, particularly for new DMs, I believe experienced DMs should not fudge dice or shy away from TPKs unless their group has specifically said they want to play in a game where their characters don't die, which is a fair question to ask at the beginning. Like, if people want to put a lot of work into their characters and it would be exhausting to try to make a new one, fair. But I believe there's always a better way than fudging dice, and here's one that happened to me. I've had 2 instances of TPKs. One was in a mini campaign where the players thought there was 2 people behind a door, but there was like 30. And they poked that bear and got swarmed, and I kept signaling like you should probably leave, and they did not. And they got wiped out, and then I said, okay, you all get captured, and basically the bad guy running this place says, I'm going to keep 2 of you as my thralls, and I'm going to kill the other 2. And so that was me trying to salvage, like, maybe some of you will get to play your characters again later, like, because we were kind of doing lots of mini campaigns, and I was like going to use this lady again. And later on, they did reclaim those characters, so it wasn't like 4 characters died, it was just 2. But it was meaningful. But the problem was they thought I was being unfair, and later they realized they were just kind of going through the stages of grief. Because in hindsight, they were like, wow, Jordan really did signal to us a lot along the way. Like, this is a bad situation. Are you sure you want to just stay in the fight? You could run away, you know, like that sort of thing. So that's the other thing, is you want to make it, you never want to seem unfair. That's the big thing. So the other time was about a year ago when I was running Curse of Strahd, and they just got completely out of resources, and they were on death's door after being in a dungeon. And then a very powerful person turned Lich. This was a departure from the module as written, as most people do. Showed up and said, "Hey, I'm here now, and I'm a Lich," like that sort of thing. And I thought to myself, based on the resources they just burned, this could very easily just be a TPK, one cloud kill and they're gone if the rolls go that way. And so I stopped and I said to them, do you want me to run this and not hold back, and the glory is yours if you win and you live and die by your own decisions, or do you want me to nerf this or pull it back and change the narrative? And they chose to face it. And to their credit, only one character died, and it was a lot of fun, and it's very memorable for me. And that's why I say there's always a better way than fudging dice. Because if I had just run that when they clearly probably were going to lose someone or multiple, they can tell when I'm just like, they're like, this is a Lich, why didn't it do anything? And so it can be obvious. So I just communicate with people and let them know like what you're thinking. And I think that really does matter, and it's better than just lying to your players. And going back to meaningful decisions, if they build for damage and then you just keep buffing every monster's hit points mid-fight, it's like they didn't build for damage at all, because they end up killing him in the same amount of time. And so I have a lot of opinions on this, but I believe that TPKs shouldn't be something you worry about unless you've just communicated with your players that you'll never have a TPK, or there's always like a capture scenario or something like that.
Yeah, the TPC, the total party capture.
Yeah. And so I don't really like the advice when people just say, oh, you go on a resurrection quest, oh, now they're all in hell and they're trying to get out. It's like, that's a total 180 from the campaign they wanted to play. And so I don't really love that advice, honestly. And so and one other thing, I think people should embrace having campaigns where you can come in and out with different characters, and you don't have to play the same character the whole campaign. And I think that would honestly alleviate a lot of this pressure. So I think I gave like 5 different answers. I'll pass the talking stick now.
All very fascinating, though. AJ.
Ooh, well, I've had fireballs by far the largest source of TPKs in my game, so it's always the player's fault. They're firing a fireball into an enclosed space with powdered kegs and drums of booze and things like that, and physics are physics, just a compression explosion inside that space, you're all dead, you're pulverized, there's no hope. Another one was they fired a fireball into a laboratory that had lots of very, very toxic materials that had a plume of gas that basically just ruled was like a dragon's breath weapon that hit them and wiped out about 90% of the characters, and the one remaining alive character had no means to bring them back. It was an Ebron campaign, we weren't getting into it, so we just decided to shelve that campaign and move on to the next one. So sometimes it's a good opportunity to stop, stick your head out and go, yeah, no, I'm not really into this, can we do something else? And everybody sort of just, you have a session 0 plus, 0 characters left session where you make that decision of where we're going to go from here. Do we really want to bring this back? Other times you have campaigns where you're trying different things, like in modern D&D play, there's a lot of people who play the total party capture option where, your character doesn't die, he gets thrown off a cliff, or he gets captured by the dragon, or he jumps in the well, or he gets teleported somewhere and hooks back up with the party later. And that's perfectly fine. It's mechanically, it's pretty much exactly the same, but it just provides you with more plot options rather than you're stuck with having to cut the character's finger off and resurrect them later, sort of thing. And that can present its own sort of problems. And also there's people who really hate that, and the prospect of death is something that they really need in their campaign, because particularly old school players, those of us who do sit down and relate anecdotes of their past games, we find that we remember the character deaths a lot better, and those stories are quite often the most fun to retell, because it's kind of self-depreciating. My character died so bad. This is how it happened, and then you sort of one up yourselves, like you're comparing the RPG scars. You know, oh, this one was from 1973 in the campaign to retake the Redfell Keep. You know. So there's lots of different options you can have. Also, one thing that you don't see a lot these days, which is a much more of an aspect of old school play, is people playing multiple characters in the campaign. So if one character dies, you fall back on the other, or you have backup NPC hirelings and things like that who are also capable of being uplifted to a player character. Or you have campaigns where you have multiple tiers of play at the same time. Like we had a temporal campaign where we had very, very high level characters who were supposed to be fighting a god. That was the end battle of the campaign that we were all working towards with our lower level characters who were support characters for those main characters who were doing things in the past and in the present to nerf the boss so that the main characters wouldn't get killed in the final battle. We never actually ended up having the final battle. We ended up stopping the disaster before it even happened. So yeah, but there was a very interesting campaign that ran for a long time, and there were some very interesting things like our characters went back in the past and established a school that built Warforged servants that worked for us through time. So we would give them instructions, jump forward in time, and a couple of centuries later our castle was built and our secret network was constructed, and this old, now rickety Warforged was like, you've reappeared. It was great.
What I love most is that whole thing started with the Simpsons Skinner meme. It's them that did it, not me. They're the ones.
Holy crap. Time travel, what a thing to incorporate. Anthony, any thoughts on TPKs and how I might implement them into our campaign?
I'd rather you didn't, personally, but I haven't had a TPK in my short time of DMing, but I think I count myself lucky for that. And honestly, I don't really have too much to add beyond what has already been said. So, yeah, I just think, talk about it beforehand. Communication is key. If your players don't want that to happen, then don't make it happen. That's fine. And I'm just going to throw it over to Teni to keep going.
I do have one thing to add. If you have a player at the table, and this is kind of a meta thing, where the player is having problems with their character, maybe because they're having confidence issues or something like that, there's a particular thing that some people do where they try and get their character killed in game, and it's a very disruptive and selfish and antisocial thing to do, because it drags other characters. Like if you're playing your character correctly, sort of thing, honestly, they're going to try and save that other character, and it can end up getting them TPK'd because one particular player is trying to suicide their character. Sorry, trigger warning everybody. But that sort of thing is a good case where you step in as a dungeon master and say, no, I'm not going to let you do that. You can roll up a new character and I'll transition your character out, but don't do that. That's a suck thing to do.
Oh yeah, just talk to your DM and say, I want to retire this character. That's fine. After a life of adventuring, or even like 2 weeks, it's like, yeah, I get it. You got 200 gold pieces and want to call it quits. You're set. Unlike Anthony, I am not as fortunate. I have committed the total party capture. It was a really dumb situation too. Like, charged into a gang's lair, took out the boss, but the true boss was a beholder, so they were not high enough level to encounter this thing I'd anticipated to be an NPC encounter, and got wiped, and one player got away, everybody else was captured, and that goblin player was like, I'm gonna go to the tavern and hire some adventurers to help me save my friends, so it ended up on a bit of a loop like that. But I agree in that, like, have that session 0 discussion. If death is something that the players are like, yeah, we want it to happen, don't go back on it. Like Flutes was saying there, like, if you've established that, don't fudge the dice. It's let things happen as they happen. Like, if the entire party dies, I think it's like, maybe I'll check in again and be like, we established death was a thing. Do you want to keep playing these characters, or do you even want to continue this story? If they want to continue the story, you either accept the deaths or revive the players somehow. We've already talked a bit about like ways that that's done, you know, the capture, the resurrection story. And I agree, that's a totally new story. So it's like, why bother with that? So perhaps it's like, you know, considering who are they affiliated with? Who are they close with? You know, you have that joke of, Elfian the elf has died, so I'm going to make Elfian 2 his son. Like, you just as simply as that, the mechanics are all the same. Maybe he's a little different personality-wise. That's a way to kind of get around that.
You could have a campaign that starts with the characters are investigating the death of a previous party. So they went into this dungeon, they all died, and now you're going to investigate what happened. If that party dies, the next campaign arc starts with them going in to investigate where your characters all die. So yeah, you can do that.
Oh yeah, like there was one party I was a part of where we all died. We got wiped out. I got wiped out by falling off a bridge. But our characters took out the king of this kingdom, and then we got slaughtered by a random barbarian group. So we're like, okay, this was kind of a meaningless death. And then we came back because we were playing a villain campaign. And then we came back as heroes, cleaning up the mess we had caused as our villains. So that was kind of interesting to explore that way. We caused the problem and then had to fix it.
I feel like AJ's idea would be perfect for a Call of Cthulhu campaign, where you just get into that infinite loop of like, what happened to these guys? And then you have to just pick up, and then when that group dies, what happened to these guys? And you just continue a whole campaign just knowing that you're always going to be investigating your own deaths.
Also works for like a Tomb of Horrors campaign where you don't want to have to play act like your character doesn't know anything about what is in the next room because they found the journal of the people who previously died. Just, you know, it just happened to be dragged out by a rat or something, you know. And it's like, oh, okay, we can just get up to where we were before.
Play the rats.
Yeah. Or if you've got a previous campaign that's not even connected to this one, but it's on the same world, and the character happened to die by falling off something, then when you're really pissed off with a particular character, they get hit by a falling character.
As long as you're not setting dates, yeah.
Wow. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, on this topic, Denny, I have made it my bit of advice. I made a YouTube short about it and got a pretty good response to it, where I told people, if you think the threat of death for your character, like if that peril is important to you for your play style to feel like you are making meaningful decisions with your character, tell your DM that you are okay with your character dying, and I swear it will change your game. Because that's the main thing, is DMs don't want to seem unfair or like hurt a player, like their friend's feelings by like their character dying. You know, it's awkward. But if you just like say, yo, it's fine if it happens, it's part of the game, it really takes a lot of pressure off the DM, and I recommend it.
That's a fantastic point. Yeah, absolutely. Once you give them the okay, they're like, all right, let's have some deadly encounters now.
Yeah, for sure.
Some spicy to it, you know?
The Stargate SG-1 role-playing game, which was just kickstarted relatively recently, and they have some mechanics which sort of advance and expand on 5th edition a bit, and one of them is they have a tension level dice system. So, you know, when you have traps and skill checks with consequences like falling damage and things like that, the tension system actually changes the dice roll, like the dice increment that you use for that. So if you have it at tension level 1d4, obviously getting hit by a poison dart trap that does 1d4 damage in increments is a lot different from getting hit by a poison dart trap that does 1d12 into points of damage per increment of dice. And with that, you also set the tone of the game, so it's more comedic, consequences aren't so dire and things. So you can alter that so that the base campaign is more comedic and more character driven, or it's a little bit more deadly. So I like to think that TV episode type games are lower. Dungeons and Dragons is actually a bit more deadly than your average TV show, and then you've got games like Warhammer 40k and stuff like that, which are deadly. So consequences are dire, and your characters aren't going to be extremely fleshed out. They're going to be short and quite often die. So yeah.
Fred, any thoughts on TPKs?
Yeah, I've done 4 videos on it a long time ago when nobody had the balls to talk about character death or TPKs on YouTube because they thought the logarithm would jump on them and destroy their channel. So I've had lots of experience as a dungeon master and as a player with TPKs and character death, like truckloads. So at this point in my life, as a player and a dungeon master, I don't care if my character dies or another character dies or if there's a TPK. I couldn't give 2 hoots. I don't care. I frankly don't give a toss how somebody else deals with character death at their own table, whether they're a player or a dungeon master. It's none of my business, okay? I'm only dealing with my stuff. Whatever they're doing, and who cares? So for me, ultimately, because I have seen it happen and been on the tail end of it so many times, as a dungeon master, I don't even make the decision anymore. I just say, look, if your character dies or specifically a TPK occurs, but even with a character death, I just say to the players, like, what do you want to do? Like, what are we doing next? Do you want to roll up new characters? Fine, roll up new characters. No, you want to play the same characters? Fine, I'm fine with that. Have you got a way to do it? No, you don't, because everybody died? Well, fine. Well, there's things like captured as one, but we can go with you're all raised as zombies by the necromancer who wiped you out, and now you can break the chains of your restriction and then feed on his flesh as payment for the horrible trauma that you will now suffer for. Probably, I don't usually make them zombies forever. Ghosts, I've had my whole party come back as ghosts and find themselves continuing the journey in the same location, but in the ethereal, dead world, underworld, whatever you want to call it, where everything is sort of like 2-dimensional paper kobolds or something like that. So I've done that sort of thing. It works fine. I've done the let's go to hell thing when they wanted to do that. I've tried out the AJ made me laugh when he was talking about characters going off and new characters going off and trying to save or rescue the bodies of the previous group, because I've had players say they want to do that as well. It hasn't actually happened more than once as far as I can tell, but I know it does come up. And Favours to the Gods, I've done that one. I've tried the had groups that have wound up as werewolves and vampires, and one group who decided to stick bags of holding into each other and caused a singularity. Don't tell me in 5e there's no such thing as a bag of holding going into a bag of holding causing a black hole, because I don't care what Wizards of the Coast says. So, end of world, and Fred, we've got seconds to go. Can I cast the wish spell? And I said yes. And so they turned back time. So we're now dealing with time travel. So time travel, I always just push it back on the players. Then I don't have to worry about people getting upset because they spend a lot of time building a character and they want to keep playing it, or watching a grown man crying at the table, which is the most appalling thing to have to deal with. It's even worse if it's a woman who's breaking down in front of you. So eliminate that problem for myself. If you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't, I don't care. I just don't feel like it's a big issue. TPKs, you can even, I've had groups who are just like, we all died. Do you want to continue the campaign? And then I said, no, we'll just end it there. I'm like, that's actually all right. So, yeah.
Amongst your list of ways to like bring the party back after death, it was just like, what if you have like a seedy group of clerics who've like raised deaded everybody and went, yeah, you're now in debt 500 gold pieces, and you're going to be paying off your debts because we brought you back.
Oh, that happened to me. It was when I was brand new. We were part of a guild, and we were teaching one of my friends. We like spent like an hour and a half teaching him to make his character and stuff like that, and then we did just like a quick encounter, just like a tutorial thing, and the DM threw like 5 shadows at us because he thought they were 1/4 CR, not half, and they're also shadows. So we died, and so my guy who was based on Jerry from Parks and Rec was just like in debt to become an adventurer after that, when he was just a glass blower before. And yeah, anyway, we didn't need that whole story, but yeah, that exactly can happen.
And you come back as a half golem or like a warforged, so your soul's actually been captured and put in the Golra of this warforged. It's like, has no memory of his past life, but yeah, he comes to serve.
In this case, he just needed to.
My service does not end.
In this case, he was just an adventure due to debt, which is the most relatable real world, I think, call to adventure there is. He just needed to make money for his daughters and his wife Gail. You know.
Yeah.
I love this idea of a Tom Nook cleric that just right off the bat.
Tom Nook. Oh gosh. We better move on to Trevor before we get too sidetracked here.
Bring your character back to life, but the only cleric in town that can do it is a necromancer, so you may come back to Revenant.
A Nookromancer?
Necromancer.
Hey.
A necromancer is just a really slow healer. So when it comes to me, no fun allowed. I do have a name and a reputation to uphold. I have ran a whole bunch of different systems. I have ran a lot of characters dying. I have dozens of TPKs under my belt at this point. I've dealt with a lot of various different circumstances, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to the story beat. If it makes sense that they get captured because they're more profitable alive than dead, then capture them. If it's more enjoyable that they get locked away up in some, weird nest and then they have to take over some random NPCs for a session and then they have to save their friend themselves, then that's awesome. But quite frankly, there's a lot of times where they're going up against the villain and the villain wants them dead. And if I don't run the villain as killing them, then I am air quote essentially ruining the experience because my players will know it, I'll know it, everyone will know it. And I think what it really comes down to is running the game as enjoyable for everybody. And for some people, the game is only enjoyable if you never die and the game is sunshine and rainbows. But for me personally, and for a lot of my players, the game is most enjoyable when they overcome challenges and they know that I'm not acting as some weird, stage artist. I am operating as a referee, and my players overcome, they get the score, and they walk home happy. There are some times where I have not been able to salvage a campaign, but not salvaging a campaign makes it that much better.
Yeah, well spoken. As always expected.
Yeah.
And how about you, Alex?
So not to parrot a bit of what everyone else is saying. Like this is super important in your session 0. I mean, this is one of those issues that's why you have a session 0 to talk about this. Because, yeah, I mean, especially like this I've personally been lucky. I've never actually experienced a TPK myself, but in character death, it's happened. But honestly, I've been captured more than I've been killed. Which I'm actually okay with character death. Like I'm totally fine. I like making characters.
Hey, come over to my table real quick.
Yeah, I mean, like I like making characters enough that and it gives some of that consequences to it. So you're not just running forward. Halo Combat Evolved, attacking everything. But there again, like you see tables, especially what I've noticed with like a lot of younger players, where they get really emotionally invested. People use this game as a bit of a therapy, and so their character dying really genuinely affects them, and so you don't want to see that. And so it's really important to establish that ahead of time. That being said, like as far as like killed versus captured, I think it really depends on what you're fighting. If you're fighting bandits, it totally makes sense that they capture you and try to auction you off or sell you or whatever. But if you're facing ogres or a dragon, depending on the aspect, it doesn't make so much sense that the dragon comes in and fire breaths and you're all dead, but somehow he captured you even though you're on fire. It breaks a little bit of immersion at that point. But what I personally want to do, and I've thought about this with my campaign, what I'd love to do for mine, if I ran into a TPK, because my group, I told them ahead of time, I'm like, there's consequences. You can die, and what I'd love to do is, if the group dies, then you lost, and I'd have a time jump, 10, 15, 20 years. So whatever your threat you're trying to fight won. And so then the follow-up would be, so it's kind of like a different campaign, but at the same time, so you'd pick up later on and have to deal with the consequences, fallouts of that first group losing. You know, are you trying to fight, you know, trying to stop an evil from taking over your kingdom? Well, cool. Now that they won, so you're part of the resistance. You know, something like that. I always thought that'd be fun to, and it almost makes me want to, you know, I won't do it, but you know, it almost makes you want to do a TPK so that that's just part of it. But it again, if it feels forced, it's gonna cheapen it.
All right, guys, 8 T-Rex pop up in front of you.
I like to play this game Suddenly Bears, where there's just 10 bears pop up out of nowhere. Maybe they're owlbears.
If you have something like the infamous West Marches campaign, for which, for those of you who don't know, it's the same campaign world shared by multiple DMs and groups who are running concurrent campaigns that affect each other. And if you have a TPK, that particular threat that they're dealing with now becomes the responsibility of other people having to deal with that threat that's now coming at them from a flank sort of thing. So that can be interesting, and TPKs can actually be a part of that ongoing thing. So it becomes a meaningful and acceptable thing, because it's now you can watch the effect it has on other groups and things. It's like, well, we screwed up, and now we watch the horrible, you know, the Schadenfreude. Watching somebody else dealing with their misfortune can be cathartic. Yeah,
I like seeing the consequences of a death as opposed to just it being done. You know, what's the fallout of it? What happens? How does that change things? I like that idea.
Mm-hmm. And
makes scars.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have to. Oh, go ahead.
Particularly your role as a DM narrating the consequences and the after effects of that. Like, what happens in the dungeon when your characters are all died? What happens to their magic items and things like that? It could be quite funny to like have, well, a Goblin King rose up because he had the sword of slaying, you know, and that sort of thing.
Coincidentally, TPKs do lead back into meaningful choices because you chose to be a loser and fail, right?
I was not where I thought you were going with that, but I loved it.
I was going to mention as well, like with Alex's mention of, like, you know, we treat it as like that's the end of the campaign. You got the bad ending. Technically, it's like you don't have to jump so far into the future as well. It could be like they've advanced their plot, and then a new group of potential adventurers are like starting to feel the impact on their hometown or whatever, and they're like, we should go investigate, and they kind of become tied in. So it's not like the bad ending yet, but they're further along, and that's kind of the new consequence. But yeah, these are
one of the
points.
most envious things about long-running campaigns that new players like look at and think, oh man, I wish we had something like that, is that legacy aspect of it. Like having a character that rises all the way up in levels and becomes a god that continues on in the next campaign, and your future characters can actually select that character as their deity. That's an awesome experience that I've actually had. So my character Bel Chimerol became Bel, the god of psionics, from rising up from this. The psionics, the psionic classes in 4th edition started off really weak, and yeah, so that was really fun. I think that character died like 5 times from spider bites, making meaningless decisions to lift up at rocks and look what's underneath them. And then one day the DM said, "It's a spider. It bites you, you die." And yeah, having that legacy stuff can kind of be advanced and forwarded into your or inserted into your campaign when you have a previous character that has died, and then a future player decides to play an ancestor, a descendant, say, of that character, and they want to recover that sword or that shield because it's an icon or family heirloom, or say something like a bronze dragon, fairly infamous for collecting bits and pieces, and they will actually track down the family and say, here's this shield that your hero great-great-grandfather used in this adventure, and here it is. And it could have, there's a local sage passing through who just happens to be able to cast the Legend Lore spell, and they've got lots of information about a potential windfall of cash that this character stashed somewhere. So there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and I agree with AJ that legacy thing is something really people want, is that legacy. And right now in Critical Role Campaign 3, there's heaps of legacy stuff going on, and some people say like, oh, isn't this cheap? They're just like referencing their own work, and I'm like, no, this is the most realistic D&D thing I've ever seen. Because if you're in a shared world and you're just doing a time skip later, like absolutely that's what would happen. And so I actually really like that, and that's one of the few things that I think people could look to Critical Role and think that's realistic, that I could look forward to in my game, and that's really cool. And like you said, Denny, if there is like a TPK sort of situation, sometimes just a time skip is great, because then it's like the NPCs they interact with and the things they learned isn't just wasted and you wipe it away and do something totally new, unless they want to do that. A time skip can be a great way to say, okay, were there any NPCs that you wanted to be, or any factions you interacted with that where you're like, oh, I didn't think of that when we started our first campaign, but now we interacted with that Thieves Guild and I kind of know how it works. I'd love to be like this ranked person in that, you know? So there's ideas for your next character that come out of that that can enrich your world and make your next character fun.
Yeah, if your bumbling thief gets in as a legacy at a Thieves Guild because your previous character was really good, that's a great tie-in.
Yeah.
So
D&D is one of those things that it's great to make a player go, it's the guy, it's the thing, it's the thing.
we know that. So to kind of wrap up this question, I feel like what we've kind of boiled it down to is, as long as you talk to your players about death, TPKs are really nothing to worry about, and actually pretty easy to solve.
Just kill them. It's that easy.
Can be an opportunity to propel your game as a role-playing game that has got aspects to it that an electronic role-playing game can never match, really.
Yeah, I don't think DMs should fear TPKs. I think it should just be a meme that they're scary, but I think it should be more normalized if you're being
Maybe
fair.
don't fear the Reaper.
Don't fear the Reaper.
Just charge into hell, folks. And that brings us to the end of this discussion of total party kills. If you have a particular way you like to handle TPKs, or you have a different idea of how you might carry on after a TPK happens, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And be sure to check out all the YouTube channels of all the guests that appeared here. You can find the links to their channels down below. Leave them a subscribe, and be sure to subscribe here for the next Dungeon Master Roundtable segment to come up. And until next time, may you always play Dicely.